everyone, my name is Abigail Nottingham, and today I'll be producing a speech over the retelling of a narrative. And today specifically I'll be sharing the story of Cinderella. Everyone knows the story of Cinderella, especially us girls. And I think Cinderella is just such a key figure in our lives as young girls, and I think it's so important to share this story over and over and over again, and to even tell it to, our future generations and our kids. So the story of Cinderella starts with her losing her father. We already know that she lost her mother at a young age, and then she lost her father, which we already know is super hard, and she now is pretty much owned by her stepmother and is her stepsisters. Now, her stepmother and stepsisters have never treated her right. Throughout the entire story, they are just completely awful to her. I can only imagine what that's like, and it becomes so hard for her, and through all of that, though, she remains kind to her stepsisters and her mother, and I think that is the most important part of the story, is that through everything she stays super kind. And the story even goes on to where she finds out about this ball, and her stepmother and stepsisters weren't even going to invite her to it, but she decided that she was going to go, and so she, made this beautiful dress, and just it amazed everyone that ever even looked at it, except for nobody really got to look at it, because as soon as she walked down the stairs, her stepsisters realized that she thought that she was going to go to the ball and decided to tear apart the dress, and the stepmother stood idly by. Now, of course, this was very hard on Cinderella and even caused for much detrimental aspects in her life, and I do believe that if it were me in that situation, I probably would have lost it way earlier. But she still was able to, instead of backlash at her sisters, she was able to just run outside and fall into the ground and just cry. And this is a fantasy, and so there was some magic involved, and through that, her fairy godmother granted her her number one wish, which was to go to the ball. And so she went to the ball, and there she had the time of her life, and she didn't do what I would have done, and I would have gone and just totally bashed it. She'd been like, look at this dress, But no, she didn't do that. She was able to just be super kind and even just ignore them the whole time. She's like, look, they are negative in my life, I'm going to go over here. And she ended up dancing with the prince. Of course, she knew that the spell would be broken at midnight, so she had to go home. And she unfortunately left her glass slipper, but she was able to keep one of them. As she went back, she was super kind, super, super nice to her sisters and her stepmother. No matter what happened, she was always super nice to her stepsisters and stepmother. And, of course, later they found out that it was her who was dancing with the prince. And so the prince was looking for who fits this glass slipper, and they knew it was probably Cinderella, so they locked her in her room, and Cinderella had no way of getting out. So then, as the Princess Ward came and was trying on the stepsister's slippers, they said, are there any other women in this house? And they said, oh, there's nobody. And then, of course, Cinderella comes down, and they're like, what about her? And he says, they're like, oh, no, she's just the maid. Can you imagine being degraded to that level? You're not even considered human at that point. You're just a servant. You're nothing. And so I think that that was probably one of the hardest things for her, was just being dehumanized by her stepsisters and her stepmother. And so much so that I would have just cried, but instead she was able to stay strong, and they tried on the slipper, and they found out that she was the one that the prince had been dancing with, and she married the prince and lived happily ever after. And I think that the biggest point of the story is, despite negativity, be kind. No matter what trials lay upon you, just make sure that you are keeping a positive attitude, because you will get through it. And I think that's the number one theme of this story, is to just, no matter what, just keep going. Never stop, and never let negativity overrule your life. And I think that is the most important thing of this story. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye!